One moment of poor judgment separated these 6 individuals from living and becoming cautionary tales. These aren't freak accidents. They're results of breathtaking arrogance, social media obsession, and complete disregard for basic safety. It was August 14, 2016, when 2 sisters made a decision that would forever change their family's social media obsession. Kendra Lawson, 29, a plus-sized Instagram influencer known throughout Phoenix for her demanding Karen-like behavior and aggressive pursuit of the perfect selfie, had convinced her younger sister Emily, 26, a timid retail worker, to join her on a dangerous photography expedition to the abandoned grain silo in Gary, Indiana. Kendra's narcissistic personality and desperate need for online validation had always overshadowed Emily's gentle nature. The older sister had built her brand around confrontational content and risky photo shoots, often berating store managers while filming for her 5,000 followers. Her entitled attitude extended to her photography, believing that warning signs and safety barriers didn't apply to someone of her social media status. She often wore shirts with bold slogans that matched her outspoken personality. The abandoned Hartwell grain facility had been empty for 8 years, with a 60-foot concrete silo that had developed structural cracks. Kendra had researched the location specifically for its dramatic industrial backdrop, dismissing Emily's concerns about trespassing and safety. She arrived at sunset with professional camera equipment, having cut through chain-link fencing while demanding Emily document her rule-breaking for content. The silo's observation platform, 50 feet above ground, offered the panoramic views Kendra craved for her Instagram feed. Emily pleaded with her sister to stay away from the deteriorated safety railing, but Kendra's aggressive confidence and determination to get the perfect shot overrode any reasonable judgment. She dismissed Emily's concerns with typical Karen entitlement, insisting she deserved the best angles regardless of danger. At 7:45 p.m., Kendra positioned herself sitting on the rusted safety railing with her legs dangling over the edge. Her 280-pound frame put enormous stress on the 40-year-old steel barrier as she leaned backward for dramatic selfie angles. Emily watched in horror as her sister ignored the creaking sounds and visible rust flakes falling from the deteriorating metal. The weakened railing suddenly gave way under Kendra's shifting weight as she leaned back for another pose. Emily screamed as her sister plummeted 50 feet straight down, landing on the concrete silo floor with devastating impact. The fall shattered Kendra's spine, pelvis, and skull upon contact with the unforgiving surface. Her final expression showed complete shock that consequences had finally caught up with her demanding lifestyle. Despite Emily's frantic calls for help, the remote location meant emergency responders took precious time to arrive. Kendra had suffered immediate spinal cord severance and massive head trauma, resulting in instant death from traumatic brain injury and internal bleeding. The woman who had spent years bulldozing through life with entitled aggression now lay broken from her own reckless pursuit of social media fame. Security guards discovered the scene the next morning after Emily's desperate calls to authorities. The final selfie, found on Kendra's phone, showed her smiling on the railing just minutes before the fatal fall, a haunting reminder of how social media obsession had consumed her final moments. Her last post had been captioned with typical Karen arrogance about conquering another forbidden location. This tragic incident forever changed Emily's relationship with social media and serves as a stark reminder that the pursuit of online validation can have deadly consequences when combined with entitled behavior and disregard for safety. The abandoned silo was demolished 6 months later, following Kendra's death. It was June 18, 2016, when a young woman's need to prove herself in a male-dominated world would lead to a fatal miscalculation on the streets of Detroit. Tiffany Greer, 29, an experienced auto mechanic who had spent 5 years working in a garage repair shop, had earned respect for her technical skills, but constantly felt the need to demonstrate her fearlessness in Detroit's underground street racing scene. Tiffany's aggressive and overconfident personality made her a standout figure among the predominantly male racers who gathered in the abandoned warehouse district every weekend. Her petite frame belied her fierce determination to outperform anyone who questioned her abilities behind the wheel. She had invested months of her salary and countless hours modifying her 1995 Honda Civic, installing a turbocharged engine that produced nearly 3 times the horsepower the compact car was originally designed to handle. The Warehouse District had become Detroit's premier illegal racing destination due to its long, straight roads and minimal police presence. However, the area was notorious for poor road conditions, oil stains from industrial trucks, and dangerous intersections that had claimed several vehicles over the years. Despite these hazards, racers continued to gather there because of the quarter-mile stretch of relatively straight asphalt. Tiffany arrived that Saturday night with her heavily modified Civic, the engine bay packed with aftermarket parts that transformed the economy car into a potential death trap. Her dismissive attitude towards safety equipment was well known among the racing community. She openly mocked other racers who wore helmets or installed roll cages, viewing such precautions as signs of weakness rather than wisdom. The car's original safety systems had never been upgraded to handle the massive power increase. Her worn tires, which she had been meaning to replace for months, showed dangerous levels of tread wear that would prove catastrophic under high-stress conditions. Fellow racers had warned her about the combination of excessive power and inadequate safety equipment, but Tiffany's stubborn personality made her dismiss their concerns as jealousy. At 11:30 p.m., Tiffany lined up for what would become her final race. The quarter-mile drag race against another modified vehicle drew spectators who gathered along the sides of the industrial road to witness the competition. She revved her engine aggressively, the turbocharged motor producing an intimidating roar that masked the inherent instability of her setup. When the unofficial starter dropped his hand, Tiffany launched her car at maximum acceleration. The excessive horsepower immediately overwhelmed her worn rear tires, which lost traction on the oil-stained asphalt surface. The car began sliding sideways at approximately 60 miles per hour, completely beyond her control despite her mechanical expertise. The Honda spun violently across the road before slamming sideways into a concrete loading dock with devastating force. The impact compressed the entire driver's side of the vehicle by nearly 2 feet, crushing the door frame and window directly into Tiffany's body. Her ribcage, left arm, and pelvis were crushed instantly, while she became trapped inside the mangled wreckage. Spectators rushed to help, but found Tiffany unconscious and bleeding heavily from massive internal injuries. The steering wheel had been driven into her chest, while the roof had collapsed down to shoulder level, creating a horrific scene that would haunt witnesses for years. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but required specialized extraction equipment to remove Tiffany from the crushed vehicle. The process took an additional 25 minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene from massive internal trauma, multiple organ failure, and severe blood loss. Investigation revealed the tragic irony that Tiffany's mechanical skills had created the very weapon that killed her, while her dismissal of basic safety equipment had sealed her fate. It was July 4, 2017, when a man's desperate pursuit of internet fame would turn a backyard celebration into a deadly spectacle. Bryce Harlow, 28, an unemployed construction worker from Bakersfield, California, had spent 6 months creating increasingly dangerous YouTube videos for his channel, which had attracted only 847 subscribers despite his reckless efforts to achieve viral stardom. Bryce's impulsive personality and complete lack of risk assessment had already resulted in 2 broken bones and a concussion from previous failed stunts, but his obsession with professional stuntmen drove him to attempt ever more dangerous feats. His girlfriend, Sarah, had grown increasingly concerned, watching him transform from a hardworking tradesman into someone consumed by the need for online validation. For his 4th of July special, Bryce conceived what he believed would be his breakthrough stunt, jumping his motorcycle over his neighbor's above-ground swimming pool while fireworks exploded overhead. The plan seemed simple in his mind, but his minimal motorcycle experience and tendency to overestimate his abilities created a recipe for disaster that everyone could see except Bryce himself. He spent 3 days constructing a wooden launch ramp using scrap lumber and basic construction tools. His background in construction gave him confidence in building structures, but designing a motorcycle jump ramp required engineering knowledge he didn't possess. The ramp's angle, height, and structural integrity were based on guesswork rather than proper calculations. Sarah pleaded with him to abandon the dangerous project, while his neighbor threatened to call the police. However, his stubborn determination and belief that this would finally bring internet fame made him dismiss all concerns as jealousy from people who didn't understand his vision. The evening of July 4th arrived with perfect weather and neighbors celebrating with traditional fireworks displays. Bryce set up multiple cameras to capture every angle of what he was certain would become his viral masterpiece. His 250 cubic centimeter dirt bike was adequate for trail riding, but hardly professional stunt equipment. At 9:30 p.m., with fireworks booming overhead and neighbors watching in horrified fascination, Bryce revved his motorcycle and approached the homemade ramp at 35 miles per hour. The wooden structure, built without proper engineering, immediately began buckling under the combined weight and force of the motorcycle hitting it at speed. The ramp collapsed completely just as Bryce reached the takeoff point, sending both bike and rider tumbling forward in a chaotic mass of splintering wood, twisted metal, and human flesh. Instead of launching gracefully over the pool, Bryce was thrown from the disintegrating motorcycle directly toward his neighbor's brick barbecue pit. He struck the brick structure head first at full speed, causing immediate skull fractures and severe cervical spine damage. The motorcycle landed on top of him, crushing his chest and abdomen while pinning him against the unforgiving masonry. The sickening crash sound silenced the neighborhood celebration, as witnesses realized they had just watched someone die. Neighbors rushed to help, but the damage was catastrophic and immediately apparent. Bryce's labored breathing and blood pooling around his head told the story his cameras would later confirm in horrifying detail. He lost consciousness within 45 seconds and died from traumatic brain injury and massive internal bleeding. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes but could only confirm what everyone already knew. The entire incident had been captured by his own cameras, creating a disturbing record of how the pursuit of internet fame had cost him everything. It was September 12, 2018, when a marketing executive's obsession with capturing the perfect photograph would lead him into one of nature's most deadly traps. Owen Maddox, 35, a successful marketing director from Chicago, had planned his Yellowstone vacation as an elaborate social media showcase designed to impress his colleagues and prove to his recently divorced ex-wife that he was thriving without her. Owen's competitive and attention-seeking personality had always driven him to one-up others in every aspect of life. His need for validation had intensified following his divorce 6 months earlier, when his ex-wife left him for his narcissistic behavior and constant need to be the center of attention. This Yellowstone trip represented his chance to show the world he was living his best life. He had spent weeks researching the park's most dangerous and restricted areas, specifically seeking locations where previous visitors had been injured or killed, believing these forbidden zones would provide the most dramatic backdrops for his photography. His marketing background had taught him that controversy and risk generated engagement, and he applied this philosophy to his personal social media with reckless abandon. The Norris Geyser Basin backcountry area contained numerous unmarked hot springs, with ground temperatures exceeding 180 degrees Fahrenheit, accessible only through unofficial trails that park rangers actively discouraged. These thermal features were particularly dangerous because they lacked the boardwalks and safety barriers found at popular tourist destinations. Owen arrived at the thermal area at dawn, after hiking 2 miles off the marked trail system, deliberately avoiding official paths where rangers might spot him. He carried professional photography equipment worth several $1,000s, completely ignoring park regulations that prohibited visitors from approaching unmarked thermal features. His research had identified an unnamed hot spring approximately 15 feet in diameter that had been the site of previous accidents, making it perfect for his purposes. The spring's remote location and tragic history would make his photographs stand out from typical tourist shots, feeding his ego and providing the dramatic content he craved. At 6:45 a.m., Owen approached the hot spring with his camera equipment, stepping confidently onto what appeared to be solid ground around the spring's perimeter. His expensive hiking boots and professional outdoor gear gave him a false sense of security as he positioned himself for the perfect shot. The ground surface was actually a thin layer of mineral deposits and organic matter formed over scalding water, creating a deceptive crust that could not support human weight. His first step broke through this fragile barrier, plunging his right leg into 180-degree thermal water up to his thigh, causing immediate excruciating pain. Owen screamed and instinctively tried to pull his leg out, but his panicked movements caused more unstable ground to collapse beneath him. He sank waist-deep into the deadly spring as severe burns immediately began destroying his skin and muscle tissue, while thermal shock sent his body into immediate physiological crisis. His frantic attempts to escape only resulted in deeper submersion into the superheated water, which began cooking his internal organs and causing his core body temperature to rise to fatal levels. Within 3 minutes, Owen had lost consciousness from shock and pain as his cardiovascular system began shutting down. Park investigators found his rental car the next day, triggering a search that located his body 18 hours after the incident. The recovery team discovered his expensive camera equipment at the spring's edge, along with photos showing his final moments before the fatal accident. This tragic incident serves as a stark reminder that nature's most beautiful features can also be its most deadly. It was March 22, 2019, when a plumber's overconfidence would lead to a fatal encounter with electricity in a suburban Tampa garage. Dustin Crowley, 41, a seasoned plumber with 15 years of experience, had built a reputation for his rugged, no-nonsense approach to home repairs and his dismissive attitude towards safety protocols and building codes. Dustin's straightforward personality had served him well in plumbing, but his growing arrogance about his technical abilities had begun extending into areas where he lacked proper training. He often told customers that real tradesmen didn't need permits or inspections, viewing such requirements as bureaucratic obstacles designed to inflate costs. When homeowner Janet Martinez contacted him about installing a new 240-volt outlet for her electric car charger, Dustin immediately saw an opportunity to expand his services. The job legally required a licensed electrician, but Dustin convinced Janet he could complete the work for half the price of a certified electrical contractor. His plan involved tapping into the existing 240-volt dryer circuit rather than running new wiring, a shortcut that would save time and materials. Dustin had watched several YouTube tutorials the night before and borrowed a basic voltage tester, believing this minimal preparation was sufficient for the electrical work ahead. The garage presented several hazards that a trained electrician would have immediately recognized. The concrete floor was damp from a recent car wash, creating a conductive surface, while the cramped workspace made it difficult to maintain safe distances from live electrical components. Dustin arrived with his standard plumbing tools and the borrowed voltage tester, confident that his mechanical aptitude would translate seamlessly to electrical work. His decision to work on the live circuit stemmed from his desire to avoid resetting the homeowner's digital clocks and electronic devices. At 2:15 p.m., Dustin began working on the live dryer outlet while kneeling on the damp concrete garage floor. He planned to splice into the 240-volt circuit by cutting existing wires and installing a junction box, unaware that this approach violated multiple electrical codes. Using standard wire cutters with non-insulated handles, Dustin attempted to cut through what he believed were de-energized wires. However, he had failed to properly test the circuit, and the wires were still carrying full 240-volt power. The moment his cutters contacted both hot wires simultaneously, they created a direct short circuit that sent deadly electrical current through the metal tool handles. The 240 volts of electricity coursed directly into Dustin's hands and through his body as he knelt on the conductive concrete floor. The electrical current caused his muscles to contract involuntarily, preventing him from releasing the tools that were now conducting lethal voltage through his nervous system and directly to his heart. For approximately 8 seconds, Dustin's body became part of the electrical circuit as the current disrupted his heart's natural rhythm and caused severe burns on his hands. The sustained electrical shock induced immediate cardiac arrhythmia, causing his heart to beat irregularly before stopping entirely as the circuit breaker finally tripped. Janet Martinez discovered Dustin unconscious on her garage floor 10 minutes later. She immediately called 911, but paramedics could not restore a normal heart rhythm despite aggressive resuscitation efforts using advanced cardiac life support protocols. Investigation revealed multiple electrical code violations and determined that proper safety procedures would have prevented the fatal accident entirely. Investigators concluded that basic safety procedures and proper licensing would have prevented the accident. It was October 8, 2019, when a freelance videographer's obsession with capturing forbidden aerial footage would lead to a catastrophic encounter with commercial aviation. Narissa Kent, 26, a reckless drone pilot and YouTube content creator, had built her online following by filming illegal aerial footage in restricted airspace, believing that breaking federal aviation rules was the key to viral success. Narissa's rebellious and thrill-seeking personality made her dismissive of authority figures and safety regulations, viewing FAA flight restrictions as personal challenges to overcome. Her YouTube channel had attracted 4,000 subscribers who watched her dangerous flights over military bases and commercial airports. Working part-time editing wedding videos barely covered her expenses, but Narissa invested every spare dollar into high-end drone equipment, convinced that one spectacular aerial video would launch her career as a professional filmmaker. Her apartment was filled with expensive quadcopters and camera equipment, representing months of savings and debt. Rocky Mountain Regional Airport's restricted airspace was heavily monitored due to its massive commercial traffic volume, with sophisticated radar systems and federal agents detecting unauthorized drone operations. The airport handled over 60 million passengers annually, making any interference with aircraft operations a potential mass casualty event. Despite receiving multiple warnings from aviation authorities about her previous illegal flights, Narissa had planned her most dangerous stunt yet, flying her drone directly over active runways during peak evening traffic to capture never-before-seen footage of commercial aircraft takeoffs from extremely close range. At 8:30 p.m., Narissa positioned herself near the airport perimeter fence and launched her drone toward the active runway, where a Boeing 737 was preparing for takeoff with 180 passengers aboard. She flew her drone directly into the flight path at 200 feet altitude, attempting to film the plane's engines from dangerous proximity. The drone was immediately sucked into the Boeing 737's jet engine intake during takeoff, causing catastrophic engine failure that forced the pilots to abort takeoff and declare an emergency. The engine ingestion created a violent explosion of metal fragments and damaged turbine blades, while the aircraft skidded down the runway with sparks flying. Airport security and federal investigators had been monitoring unauthorized radio frequencies and immediately triangulated Narissa's position using detection equipment. Within minutes of the engine strike, federal agents surrounded her location, but she panicked when she realized the severity of what had occurred. Instead of surrendering to authorities, Narissa abandoned her drone controller and ran directly onto the active airport grounds, crossing multiple taxiways in complete darkness, while emergency vehicles rushed toward the disabled aircraft. Her desperate flight took her directly into the path of a ground service vehicle, traveling at 25 miles per hour. The collision was immediate and devastating, with Narissa suffering fatal head and chest injuries as the heavy vehicle struck her at full speed. She was pronounced dead at the scene from massive blunt force trauma, while emergency crews continued working to evacuate passengers from the damaged Boeing 737. The commercial aircraft made a successful emergency landing with no passenger casualties, but the incident exposed vulnerabilities in airport security systems. Federal investigation revealed Narissa's extensive history of illegal flights and multiple previous warnings she had ignored. Her death led to increased penalties for drone violations near airports and mandatory registration systems for commercial drone operators nationwide. If these shocking deaths left you stunned by human stupidity, click the next video for more unbelievable fatal mistakes.